Hello Amina, this is my feedback to your mock listening exam. Now before I start looking at the paragraphs, let me just say your notes are very good, both the first and final notes, but in the exam we're not assessing the quality of the notes. Your notes are excellent, but what you need, the only thing we're assessing is whether the last notes, the final notes, are substantially different from the first notes. And what you need to do is make sure that the difference is very obvious to whoever is going to grade your exam. So what you can do, just take the first notes, either the first or the second time you listen to the video, and they can be very messy. They can be disorganized, they can be full of abbreviations, all kinds of symbols, arrows, all kinds of things. They're not supposed to look great. Because in a real context, imagine you're in a lecture and the speaker is talking fast. You cannot cope, you cannot write full sentences, and at the same time you cannot manage to number the evidence, evidence 1, evidence 2. That you can do only later, right? So first notes should be very messy, don't worry about that, and then you can sit down, then you can start. Okay, this was main idea, this was evidence 1, 2, 3, supporting idea 1, supporting idea 2. That's when you get organized in the final notes. So then it will be clear to whoever is grading your exam that they are substantially different. Okay, so you should do that. Now let's look at the paragraphs. Oh, and one more thing. If you go to the guidelines, you will see that after when you write the notes, at the bottom of that document, you should include a short reflective note explaining how your notes changed from the first to the final notes. And it doesn't have to be very long, 3 or 4 sentences, and this should be part of that document with the notes. Okay, so just say, in the first notes I did this, in the second notes, the final notes, I changed this and that. Basically just a descriptive, semi-reflective note that you're going to include. Not very long. Okay, now let's look at these. So the first sentence, we need to include the title, which we have done, the name of the speaker. And then you have to say claims that or argues that, right? So instead of found that, you could say claims that, and it should be in the present simple. Claims that original thinkers need time to think. Even though that may look like procrastination, they're actually generating ideas, and this actually helps them to be successful. So you phrased it well. Just make sure that you have an argumentative verb in the present, but I think the rest is fine. So your first sentence is quite good, and that is indeed the main idea. Now here you do not need this, because first of all, it's his personal story, and remember, we're staying away from examples and evidence. We're only interested in the supporting ideas and in the main idea, and that's it. Now in a lot of these TED Talks, the speaker will tell an entertaining joke or a story, and let's say it's a 10-minute video. The first 3 or 4 minutes will be just a story, just interacting with the audience. We do not include that in the summary. Okay, we just go straight to the supporting ideas. So your summary should actually be this. You see? Obviously, you will need to expand on each one. The first advice, or the first surprising fact about original thinkers is that blah 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 blah, like you're saying. So you've done it well here, but you do need to expand a little bit more and just forget about this, because that's just a story, kind of to warm up the audience, right? We're not interested in that. Not interested in evidence or examples. But you have actually identified the ideas very well. Now, instead of the last idea, you could use a cohesive device. You could say, in conclusion, the speaker claims that or argues that, right? So if you're going to expand this, you will also need more reporting verbs. Additionally, Adam Grant claims that, or asserts that, or another important or another surprising fact about thinkers that Adam Grant shares is that blah blah, so this will also give you more, you'll have more space obviously to expand on this, so that will give you the opportunity to include reporting verbs, cohesive devices, those kinds of things. Okay, now let's look at the identification. It's actually a very good clear identification. So you've identified the Vujade, okay, fine. Originals, they're not here, by the way, you need to tighten up the grammar. They are not afraid to do something new or to try something new, right? And then he gives 3 examples and explain these. Fine, this is a good paragraph, no problem here. Now let's look at the evidence. The evidence is not sufficient, you're saying. It's one positive example. Now, by the way, just use either only the last name of the speaker or both names, or the speaker, but not the first name, because that makes it look like you're his friend, Before this story, Adam Grant says everything should be in the present. Okay. First movers failed, which means that the frozen. Okay, that's fine. I'll take that. It's a little trivial, that observation, but fine. I like the next one. So these examples, he just gives them as examples how they started having doubts, but really that does not mean, as you're saying, that doubts are necessary for the success of a project. So you've said this quite well. This is actually a very good way to attack the sufficiency. Basically saying it's not logical, right? I like this as well. This other reason. It's not sufficient, even though 85 is a large number. That does not mean that all of them did not speak up because of fear, and that it could be for other reasons. Okay, fine. I'll take it. Now, how does that prove, though, they're not afraid to do something new? How does that prove? 85%, most people are afraid. And you're saying here that may indeed prove that most people are afraid, but you're saying that doesn't mean they could have other reasons for not speaking. Fear does not necessarily. So he's not really, it's not sufficient. This example, it's not sufficient to prove that it was fear which was motivating them. Okay, I'll take it. You're really kind of trying to look and poke holes at his argument, at how logical. You're really trying to expose the lack of logic in his argument, which is fine. Usually when we talk about sufficiency, we're not so much getting into the logic of it, but if you want to do it that way, that's fine. Usually that way that way of attacking it is usually good for the relevance section. So all of these thoughts here, when you attack the logic of an argument, that usually exposes its lack of relevance, not so much sufficiency. Sufficiency is basically, are these examples enough? And your answer could be no, they're not enough. I mean, you cannot just prove with Elon Musk and all these other people that all original thinkers. The speaker is making a very general claim, and you cannot prove such a general claim with just a handful of examples. More data needs to be added. And so a good way here to write the sufficiency section would be to say the speaker could have included more meta-analysis, more data, concretely and specifically establishing a clear correlation between lack of fear and blah blah blah. You see? So that's the way to write the sufficiency section. What you've done is very good, but it's usually, when we attack the logic, it's usually good for the relevance section, right? And here when you say it's relevant because it's accessible, that doesn't mean that it's relevant. It could be very easily accessible and be completely irrelevant. So instead of that, the relevance section, you could include these thoughts, which are actually good. You know, you're kind of getting very deep into the logic of it. That's fine. So all of this, whether the information is, whether there is an oral citation, whether he provided a source, whether it's that doesn't matter. It could be very easily accessible and still be completely irrelevant, right? So instead of this, for the relevance section, you could put this here. I think that's good for the relevance. And for sufficiency, you can just say it's not enough with only these examples. The speaker should have included this, and that to prove a direct relationship between this and that, right? Now, your representativeness section is actually quite good. When you're saying it's not one example, all of that is very good. Now, when you say some details as the location where the survey was conducted, here I'm not so sure that you need this. I mean, I guess you could say that if you want to, but really all you need to do is say, these are not typical examples, right? They're not necessarily representative of the creative process of all original thinkers. I mean, okay, maybe these people were not afraid to try something new. But how about all the rest? That's not necessarily true in all cases. You know, something like that. But generally, this is quite good. You know, when you say it's not entirely representative, it's just one positive example. Does that mean that Vujade is always effective? And it could just keep going a little bit more. Okay. Overall, that's fine. I would say work a bit on the sufficiency. The relevance is very good if you include this part for the relevance and not this part. And don't worry about looking at the evidence and saying, oh, it's easily accessible or there is no oral citations. We're not looking at that. We're taking it at face value. So even if they don't include an oral citation, that doesn't mean it's not relevant, right? So overall, I think you've understood the task well. And you should be in good shape for the exam. Thank you for being such a good student, Amina. This is my last screencast, and I just want to wish you all the very best. Okay, good luck.